Yá'át'ééh. Have you ever paid a fine? Maybe you had your car illegally parked, or it was street sweeping day, or you were in a hurry to get somewhere, or you didn't have time to register your car, right? You had to weigh it. Do I want to go and adhere to the law, or do I want to just risk the fine? And have you ever decided to pay the fine, right? To risk it and pay the fine, because it's easier to pay the fine. It's less expensive to pay the fine than it would be to obey the law in that very moment, right? We've all done it, or at least considered it numerous times, whether it's you overslept, you forgot about street parking, and your car is illegally parked as the street sweeper's coming, and you're like, well, I'm I'm so tired, I'm going to stay in bed and risk getting a ticket, and even if it's a ticket, I'll just pay the $30 fine, right? I mean, we've all at least thought that, if not have actually done it. Well, today I want to discuss Donald Trump's fine for his gag order, his $10,000 fine. I want to put that fine in context. And I want to help us understand how this fine is not really, it's not even it's not a deterrent to Donald Trump. He's learned, as most of us, especially those of us on the margins already know, the American criminal justice system is not designed. It wasn't created to hold white landowning men accountable. That's not why it exists. And he is using that to his full advantage during his court cases. My name is Mark Charles. I am a dual citizen of the United States and the Navajo Nation. I am the son of an American woman of Dutch heritage and a Navajo man. And a few times a week, I like to sit down with my second cup of coffee and talk about the social, political, and religious events of the day and try to shift the paradigm. I'm not trying to cancel anybody. I'm not trying to shame anybody, but I am trying to create common memory, because my goal is to build a healthier community. In our Navajo nation, or in the Navajo culture, we would say, I'm trying to walk in beauty. And so I invite you to join me for this discussion as we learn how to walk in beauty together. Before I begin, I want to do as I always do, which is acknowledge I'm speaking to you from Washington, D.C. My Navajo people call it Washington, and these are the lands of the Piscataway. I moved here from the Navajo Nation about 10 years ago. And I am very honored and humbled to be living on Piscataway lands. I want to thank the Piscataway for their stewardship of these lands, and just remind myself to walk with humility as I walk and live on these lands today. So, grab your favorite morning beverage, whether it's a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or anything else you like to drink in the morning. And I'd love to have a discussion about Donald Trump's gag order and the fines that have been imposed on him, specifically the $10,000 fine that he received a few weeks ago. So if you're not following this story, I'm going to get you caught up just for a little bit. Let me see who's online with me here. I see we have a few people online. Who's in the chat? Susan Yá'át'ééh. Good morning, Susan. Thank you for joining me. And thank you for being a part of my second cup of coffee this morning. It's great to have you here. For everyone else who's watching, Yá'át'ééh. So let me share with you just a few articles that I've been reading and looking at here. The first one is from Reuters, and it was from a few weeks ago, and it's just when the judge first fined Donald Trump $9,000 and threatened jail to him for contempt of court and for disobeying the gag order in the hush money trial that he's in right now. A little while later, Trump broke the gag order, and he was fined another $1,000. And he was told that, no, we will keep fining you, and we will really send you to jail. So he's now been fined a total of $10,000. If you want to look at all the ways that Donald Trump has been walking the line and breaking his gag order, the Washington Post laid it out pretty clearly here. And even looking at today, right? This is an article just from like a day ago. This came out on the 13th, so 2 days ago. This was again in the Washington Post, where Trump knows he's being watched, and so he's having his surrogates break the law for him. And so, right, what's so fascinating about this is Donald Trump knows he's being watched, right? He's being told, if you say anything publicly, if you put something on your social media accounts that either attack court workers or attack the jurors or attack the witnesses, you will be held accountable for this. He knows it's going to happen, and he knows that he's a former president of the United States, that his every word is published and put out there in the media, and he knows he's being watched. He knows he's being watched, and he continues to break this order. And so I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the fines that Donald Trump is receiving. And right, he's been fined $10,000. Now, for most of us, myself, probably all of you listening here, a $10,000 fine, when we know law enforcement is watching, would be a fairly huge deterrent, right? We might be able to say I'll oversleep and pay the $30 fine for the parking ticket I'll get because I didn't move my car for street sweeping. Maybe even we'll say I'm going to go faster because I'm in a hurry today to get to this meeting, and I'm willing to pay the $60 or $100 fine that I'm going to get for speeding. But most of us would say, if we know we were going to get caught, right? Yeah, I'm not going to risk a $10,000 fine. And that makes perfect sense. $10,000 is a very large amount of money. And so I did some research the other day, and I looked at net worth by race. And I just wanted to see where this fine fit in to the net worth of Americans, average Americans, based on race. And so I loaded some of this up. So let me show you some of these ones that I found. So in the United States, the average white family has a net worth of $250,400. A $10,000 fine is 3.99 or 4% of their net worth. Again, that's a fairly good deterrent. The average black family in the United States has a net worth of $27,100. A $10,000 fine is 36.9% of their net worth. That's a massive deterrent, right? That's almost half of that's nearly over a third of your net worth that you could be fined. Native families, right? And natives, we don't even make the national census tracking for net worth. But research has been done on different parts of Indian country, and a consensus has been that your average native family is worth $5,700. Now, why is that so low? Because a lot of our people live on reservations. And you can't own your house on a reservation. Reservations are trust lands held for us by the U.S. government. We cannot own our houses on our reservations. Even if we do own the house, we can't make any money off of it because we can't sell it. And so for most Native families, their largest investment, their largest asset is their automobile. And automobiles depreciate. They don't appreciate like real estate does. So again, not only is it income level and jobs and availability and everything else, but just the fact of life on the reservations. So the average Native family has a net worth of $5,700. A $10,000 fine is 175.4% of that net worth. Again, this is a massive deterrent. If you're in jail and you have a habit of disobeying the gag order put on you by the judge, and you know people are listening to your words and watching what you say, yeah, a $10,000 fine, which is over 3 times or over almost double your net worth. Yeah, that's a huge deterrent. Now, Trump's net worth. And his net worth has been changing, and there's a scam going on right now with his Truth Social and the way that's kind of been incorporated, and so he's getting a lot of extra stock, and the everyone, all the financial analysts are saying, yes, don't invest in this, but his supporters are. It's propping up the stock price, and his net worth, a few months ago, it was less than $2 billion. Now the general consensus is he's worth about $6.5 billion. A 10% fine, or $10,000 fine for Donald Trump compared to his net worth is 0.001538462%. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. So again, let's say, all right, let's go back to the White family, where the $10,000 fine is 4% of their net worth. And like I said, that's a fairly good deterrent. I would say that's a reasonable deterrent if you look at that. So let's say, what if we charged everybody 4% of their net worth? So a white family would pay a $10,000 fine. A black family would pay $1,082. And a native family would pay $228. Again, compared to the net worth, these are fairly good deterrents. Trump, if he were asked to pay 4% of his net worth, that would be $259 million. Again, that would serve as a fairly good deterrent for someone who's worth $6.5 billion. Now let's say we find everyone at the rate the black family would have to pay, which is 36.9%. The white family's fine would be $92,399. The black family's fine would be $10,000. The native family would be asked to pay $2,103. Again, this is a very massive deterrent when your net worth is only $5,700. And Trump, at $6.5 billion, would be asked to pay $2.398 billion. Now let's have everyone pay their fine at the native rate, which is 175.439%. If a white family were paying that fine at that rate, they would be asked to pay $439,000. The black family would be asked to pay $47,544. The native family would be asked to pay $10,000, and Trump would be asked to pay $11.4 billion. Again, this would be a massive deterrent. And the problem is right, this is what happens. This is why, one of the reasons why our prisons are filled with people of color, because people of color get arrested for seemingly less major or more minor crimes that have a fine of a few hundred or a few $1,000s, and they can't pay it. And so they literally sit in prison because they can't pay it. This is how the criminal system works. And so before you start saying, oh, that's not fair, no, this is how the system works. Now, I want to look at what would happen if all of us paid at the rate that Trump is paying. Again, Trump is paying a 0.0001538,462%. The white family at that rate would be paying a fine of 38 cents. The black family at that rate would be paying a fine of 4 cents. And a native family at that rate would be paying a fine of 1 penny. So when the court says to Trump, we're going to fine you $10,000 for breaking a gag order, he's literally asking him to pay pocket change. And this is why the court's threats are not a deterrent at all to Donald Trump. And he knows, right? He is very well aware that he's an ex-president. He has Secret Service detail. It would be highly unlikely that he would ever be put in prison. He's also a white landowning male. And so he's willing to pay the pocket change that the court is asking him to pay for breaking the gag order. And this is why they fine him $9,000. He breaks the gag order again. They fine him $1,000. And they say, no, really, we're going to put you in jail. And it's like, yeah, you're not going to do that. And he just keeps breaking it. This is why he's flaunting it. Now, in case you're wondering if what I'm saying, basing fines on net worth, our income, is crazy, that's actually not that crazy. In Finland, they base their traffic fines on income. I'm going to share this story with you from The Guardian. I spoke about this a few months ago. There's a guy who got a wealthy businessman in Finland got a $103,000 speeding ticket because they base their fines on income. And so when they pull them over for the infraction, they have a table. They can look up what his income is for that year, and they fine him based on that. And he got a $103,000 speeding ticket, the equivalent of a $103,000 speeding ticket. And again, this idea is not that far off. The University of Chicago Law School, I found this article, this piece that someone wrote there, that the constitutionality of income-based fines is plausible. They did not see anything really that would constitutionally challenge basing fines on income. Again, if fines are supposed to be a deterrent, if our justice system is supposed to treat everybody equally, that doesn't mean everybody pays the same fine, because everyone has different means to pay the fine, right? A $10,000 fine is not an equal fine. It's pocket change to Trump. It's a significant deterrent to white people. And it's a massive deterrent to Black and Native people. A economic crisis fine of that level, right? A bankrupt-inducing level. Now, I would actually argue, because we all know rich people are very, very good at masking income. Trump, that's what his other court case is about, is he masks his income and he claims massive losses. So I would say let's not even base our fines on income, because the rich people are all too adept at masking their income. Let's literally base it on net worth. Let's take their assets minus their debt, and let's base fines on that. I actually think this could be a reasonable way to go about it. Because I promise you, whether you fine Trump $250 million, $2.5 billion, or $11.5 billion, that would be a deterrent for him. He would think twice before flaunting the judge's orders. When you fine him $10,000, that's pocket change to him. That has no impact whatsoever. That's a rounding error for him. And so we need to do something, right? Obviously, we need to fix our criminal justice system. But this doing fines, the more I think about this, the more I like the idea of basing fines on net worth. If you go back and read that article by the University of Chicago Law School, they talk about, well, this is going to seem unfair to rich people because they're going to be paying a higher percentage of fines. And it's like, well, again, The purpose of a fine is to be a deterrent. And so how many, whether it's businesses or rich people or corporations, right, they just budget their fines into the cost of doing business, and then they just flaunt the law. So let's actually make it a deterrent. Anyway, those are my thoughts, my relatives. But something has to be done because Trump knows, he is very, very clear on the fact that the US criminal justice system was not created to hold him accountable. And that that's not the purpose of our criminal justice system. It's not to hold white landowning men accountable. And he knows that, which is why he's crying all this injustice. And so, yeah, he is absolutely exposing the brokenness of our criminal justice system. Not only is our criminal justice system not designed to hold him accountable, but our judges and our courts are afraid to hold him accountable. On top of that, how many of the judges is he even going to that were appointed by him? This is a massive problem. But it's the criminal justice system in all its glory here in the United States, right? When you have a colonial nation built on the lie of white supremacy and the dehumanizing of marginalized people, yeah, this is the criminal justice system you get. And this is what we're forced to wrestle with. So, yeah, I'm warming up quickly to the idea of basing fines in our country on net worth. I am positive we ever propose that, the wealthy will cry unjust and unfair. But yeah, well, let's realize our criminal justice system is unjust and it is unfair. And that's what it's doing. That's what it does to poor people all the time. This is how it works. And so if we're not going to fix the criminal justice system, let's at least make the injustice of it unjust to everybody instead of just to the poor people. Anyway, those are my thoughts, my relatives. I had another, as you know, I do these Q&As on my, with my book study special. I have a book study special where if you buy 10 copies of Unselling Truths and you order them from my website, I will give your book study a free 45-minute virtual Q&A. And I love doing these things. These are so much fun. I have done several of them over the past couple of year and a half, and I love them. I love the conversations. It's great to have a dialogue with people who have read the book, they've discussed it, and they really want to come back with some questions on it. And so I'm going to put the link, if you're interested in that, doing that with your book study, I'm going to put the link here. Into the link here. But the other day I was doing a Q&A with a group, and as we always do, we even went over time, but we had more questions than we had time for. And so they actually emailed me and said, we had another question we really would like to hear the answer to. If you're ever able to send us an answer or to give us your thoughts on it in some way, we would love to have you answer this question. And so the question they asked me was, have you received feedback from any historians on your Lincoln content? Right? So they are talking about chapters 9 and 10 of Unselling Truths. These chapters talk about the idea that the victors write the history. We kind of pose the thought of, let's imagine if Nazi Germany won World War II, and so they got to write their own history. How would their historians have recorded the legacy of Hitler? How would their historians have recorded the acts and the facts of the Holocaust? And the truth is, right, they would have made Hitler the greatest hero ever, brought them from global obscurity to global prominence. And right, we have Holocaust deniers today. Imagine if they won the war, right? What Holocaust? There was no Holocaust. I mean, it's very clear when the victors write the history, they get to create mythology. Now, that's not what people get upset about with chapters 9 and 10, but we take that idea, we take that adage that the victors write the history, and we apply that to Lincoln. And chapter 9 clearly demonstrates, based on his rhetoric, based on his speeches, based on his policies, that until the day he died, Abraham Lincoln was a blatant, unapologetic, self-proclaimed white supremacist. And then chapter 10 demonstrates that he was also one of the most genocidal presidents in our nation's history, as he goes through and ethnically cleanse the northern, central, and southern proposed routes of the Transcontinental Railway. With the Dakota War of 1862, the removal of the Dakota, with the Bear River Massacre in northern Idaho, northern Utah and southern Idaho, with the Long Walk of the Navajo and Mescalero Apache, and the Sand Creek Massacre in eastern Colorado, right? He's literally ethnically cleansing the northern, central, and southern routes of the railway, making him one of the most genocidal presidents in our nation's history. Those chapters are two of the chapters I get the most feedback on, the most comments on from people, because they present a side of Lincoln that no one has ever really acknowledged before. Right? We all know he said some white supremacist things in his debate with Judge Stephen Douglas in the Lincoln-Douglas debates, but we think he kind of fixed that over the course of his lifetime. And so when we think of white supremacists, we don't think of Abraham Lincoln. But he literally was. He said it over and over, repeated himself throughout his public life. And, right, we like to think about Andrew Jackson as one of our most genocidal presidents, and he was up there, right? He did the Indian Removal Act, and he did the Trail of Tears, right? But when you look at the systemic institutional nature of what Lincoln was doing, and then the fact that not only was he doing that, but he was announcing the progress to the country and even proclaiming days of Thanksgiving to celebrate the fruit that they were gaining from these genocides. It just makes it all the more abhorrent what Lincoln was doing. And again, that's not a side of Lincoln that people like to see. We would rather be intentionally ignorant about him. And so the question that I get asked, and I get asked this frequently, is have you received feedback from any historians on your Lincoln content? Now, I rarely get pushback from people on my Lincoln content. They don't like it. But when we wrote those chapters of the book, I was very, very, very aware of the trauma of white America and the way white America and academics especially would try to redirect the discussion away from what Lincoln did and said and into historical theory and academic blah, 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 and just make it into some dry thing that they can debate and say Mark doesn't know what he's talking about and then be done with it. I was very aware of that, right? And I know how the trauma of white America, what I call the trauma of white America, makes people want to redirect those conversations. They want to remain in a state of shock and denial. They don't want to actually wrestle with what Lincoln did or what he said. And so for that very reason, we tried to really minimize the number of historians that we quoted in chapters 9 and 10. And most of the quotes that we give in chapters 9 and 10 are quotes from Lincoln himself. And then we put those quotes in context of what he was doing historically and the implications of those actions, even up through today. And so if you have our book, or if you've ever looked our book up on Amazon or at InterVarsity Press's webpage, right? And you can read on Amazon, especially, they have a list of all the endorsements, or many of the endorsements we got for our book. And there's two endorsements there. One is actually on the back of the book. I'm going to read that one second. But the first one, and this is on Amazon's website, if you just Google my book, Unselling Truths, and you scroll down through the endorsements, not the comments, but the endorsements on the book where they actually publish it, Amazon publishes them. You'll see we have this endorsement from Karen Johnson, who is the Associate Professor of History at Wheaton College. And she said, Charles and Ra offer critiques of American myths of white American Christianity that must be accounted for as Christians of all races, reckon with and lament the brokenness of the past, to seek justice and unity in the present. Although the historical narrative lacks context, at times wrongly interpreting historical figures, actions, and therefore caricaturing the past, the authors raise powerful questions. Charles and Ra have created theological space for wisdom to grow in the church if readers seriously engage with their arguments. Again, this was why I wrote those chapters the way I wrote them. I can almost guarantee if chapters 9 and 10, and I don't know if for sure she's talking about Lincoln, chapters 9 and 10, but I'm guessing she is, but maybe she's not. But we did that not only with Lincoln, we did that with Augustine and a lot of the other things we put in here. But had we supported the majority, got the majority of our support for our arguments from other theologians and other historians, we would have been in the middle of a massive debate on critical race theory and on academic and historical narrative and blah, 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 blah. But because we did the way we did it, Karen Johnson, the associate professor of history at Wheaton College, said, holy crap, Mark and Soon-Chan made me think about history in a way I've never really wrestled with it before. And therefore, not only is she not critiquing our book, she is endorsing it. If you read the book, the back of the book, you'll find another quote by Mark Knoll. Mark Knoll is a historian. He's the author of the book, The Civil War as a Theological Crisis. If you Google Mark Knoll, you'll find he's a well-respected American historian and religious historian in the United States. And this is what he wrote. Why should I endorse a book when I do not agree with some of its historical judgments? Answer, for the same reason you should read it. Charles and Ra attack a pernicious principle, the doctrine of discovery. They review an evil history, the United States treatment of Native peoples. They challenge a persistent stereotype, American exceptionalism, and psychoanalyze white America in denial about the nation's history. The entire book, even when you think things can be evaluated differently, will make you think and think hard about crucially important questions of Christian doctrine, American history, and God's standards of justice. Again, his response was almost identical to that of Karen's in the previous context, in the previous quote, which is, holy crap. Even though I don't agree with how they did this, they did something that makes this book a must read. It will make you wrestle with things you've never wrestled with before. And that was the entire goal of the book. Now, while neither of these historians are commenting directly on Lincoln, I am willing to bet that is at least part of the critique when they say we think things could be evaluated differently, or we think they took things a bit out of context, right? Because why do I know this? Because when you Google Abraham Lincoln, the genocidal maniac, you find next to nothing out there, right? None of these Harvard historians, none of these great American historians are making this critique about Lincoln. Why? Because they're a part of the nation that won the frickin' war. They're a part of the group that's establishing the narrative. They are the victors who are writing the history. So when you have people from the margins saying, no, we're going to look at this history in a different paradigm, from a different context, and point out some things that you haven't seen before. I love those two endorsements. I am so grateful to both Karen and Mark for their endorsement of our book. Even though they both stated we don't agree with everything. I love their endorsements. I am grateful for their endorsements because that was the very purpose of the book, which is we wanted to reframe people's thinking about American history. We want to change the paradigm. We didn't want to have a meaningless, endless debate on academic style and all these other things. We wanted to make people wrestle with who these people were and what they said and what they did. And it looks like we were very successful. So I've learned over the years, very rarely do I get pushback from anyone that's any more than just an emotional argument, right? I get pushback from people who are arguing emotionally all the time. But very rarely do I get academic or even theological pushback about the history presented in this book, especially about Lincoln. And it's because when you read the words he said, when you actually wrestle with what Lincoln said, and then you look at the policies he enacted and what he did and how that fit into what was going on, yes, it's something that's a history this nation does not know, it doesn't like to talk about, but once you see it, you cannot deny it's there. So anyway, I am grateful for their endorsement. And I love I love these kind of conversations, and I appreciate that group asking the question. I'm glad I could take a few moments to answer it here on my second cup of coffee. But my relatives, I appreciate you for joining me. I hope your cup of coffee is as good as mine is. I want to just let you know how grateful I am for this space we have where we can have these types of discussions and we can have these types of dialogues, interactions. I am, as I'm on a lot of other podcasts and I get interviewed a lot and I get asked to speak a lot, I find it's really hard to have honest dialogue. And it's because so many of these other places are funded by institutions or by businesses or by corporations that have a very specific agenda of where they want to take the conversation. And so it's hard to have an actual open and honest dialogue, even if you think the person who you're engaging with would like to have it, but because of the platform that's been built for them or given for them, they can't have that conversation. And that's one of the reasons why I work so hard to keep my voice independent. That's why I do my second cup of coffees the way I do them. That's why I fund my work the way I fund it. It's one of the reasons I have my Patreon site, is because I would much rather get funding from people who are actually a partner with me in this work instead of from a corporation or an institute, a university or some other institute. Because again, every institute I've worked with over the course of my life, at some point or another, has said to me, you can't say that. You can't talk about that. You can't bring that up here. And so I've learned, I'm like, it's not that I don't partner with institutions, I partner with groups that want to do these things, but I don't let them fully fund me, because if my voice was dependent upon their funding solely, they could silence me very, very, very easily. And so anyway, so I if you like what I'm doing, you appreciate the work I'm trying to do, one of the best ways to support the work I'm doing is to subscribe to me on Patreon. I just put the link there in the chat. And it's one of the best ways to support the work and the dialogue I'm trying to engage in. I appreciate you, my relatives. I hope you have a great rest of the day. Walk in beauty. And may we all learn how to walk in beauty together. Hakone.